Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm back with you with Rudy's Common Sense. And today we're going to be talking to Miranda Devine. I'm sure you all know Miranda. She's a very, very prominent columnist for the New York Post. She's a contributor for Fox. She's had a career both in Australia and in the United States. Both her education and her work as a reporter and as a writer has spanned both countries. And her columns are some of the very, very best. And she's unfortunately one of a small breed of still intellectually honest and fearless investigative reporters. And I'm going to be talking to her about the Biden hard drive and the revelations that she's been able to find there. But she's done this across the board in many, many other areas. And it's a great privilege to be able to talk to her. Miranda, thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thanks, Mayor. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you.
The reason I wanted to talk to you in particular today is I thought your column the other day was one of the core documents that you have to understand the Biden family and how it operates, because it changes the whole nature of things. And that's the one in which he describes to his daughter, because it looks like she's going to take something over. It's hard to tell exactly what the beginning of that is, but he almost seems to be complaining that he's not respected. It reminds me of the comedian, I don't know if you know him, remember him, Rodney Dangerfield, who would always say, I never get any respect. I never get any respect. And he says to her, I mean, we'll put the text up, but he says to her that he's been taking care of the family expenses for 30 years and he still doesn't get any respect. And he hopes that Pop doesn't do to her what he did to him, which is take 50% of his income. And that's a startling statement to make, which begs for investigation. I mean, you just can't leave it there. If it's true, it makes it a 30-year bribery situation. Because if, Joe is meeting with those foreign people that he claims he never knew and never met with and didn't know about, and he's getting money from the salary they're paying, some of them, that they're paying Hunter, he's getting paid by them. Not unusual, by the way. The scheme that Hunter describes is the Chinese corruption scheme, which Schweiker outlined in his book 2-3 years ago. You pay the relative. You don't pay the wife because the wife has to disclose. You pay a close relative. The close relative holds on to the money, feeds it carefully to the person who's getting the bribe, and then at some point they square it up and they use offshore accounts. So tell me how you came across it, how you found it, how it fits into paying expenses, and how do you evaluate that? I think it was January 3rd, 2018, I believe it was.
Hi, yes. Look, once you had that statement from Hunter, and he's resentful throughout the laptop in various statements about the amount of money that he has to earn to give to his family. I mean, he does it mostly uncomplainingly. You see vast sums of money being sent off to Jim Biden, his uncle, Joe's younger brother, uncomplainingly. But he does occasionally make mention of the fact that he feels that he's carrying the entire family financially on his back. And that very marked email that you mentioned, where he says to his daughter, Naomi, you're lucky that you don't have to pay half your salary to Pop like I do. So then you have to look for any evidence of that on the laptop. Now, there's not direct evidence of 50% of his income going there, but there certainly is evidence of money going to Joe, of at least Hunter paying for Joe's bills. So in one instance, there are a number of pieces of evidence that his AT&T bill, it says JRB, which is Joseph Robinette Biden, his father's name. JRB AT&T bill, and that ranges between $180 and $190 per month. Then there's this curious email from Eric Schwerin, who is one of Hunter's business partners, basically the president of Rosemont Seneca, his firm in Washington, D.C. And this email is titled JRB's Bills. And in there is just a list of outstanding bills for maintenance and upkeep on Joe's house at the lake in Wilmington, Delaware, his mansion, really, beautiful house that he built himself. And various bills to contractors in the Wilmington area, which include, building a stone wall or rebuilding a stone wall, doing some painting at the back of the house, some columns and so on. There's even refurbishment, or it may even be complete replacement of an air conditioning system in a small cottage that's on this vast property where Joe Biden's late mother, Jean Biden, had lived, and he would subsequently rent out to the Secret Service for $2,200 a month. So that was being fixed. So all these bills, many of them quite old, a few months old, they were now the builders, contractors were harassing Eric Schwerin to get their money to be paid. So Eric has been trying to get in touch with Joe. He tells Hunter, but with no luck, and he's asking Hunter for help. And, or I guess for the okay to pay them. And he also talks about how he will pay them, what account should he use. And he mentions an account, he calls it my account several times, and he puts my into inverted commas, which implies that it's not really his account, it's an account in his name from which Joe Biden's bill.
Which name?
In Eric Schwerin's
name. In Eric Schwerin's name, and then it's unclear whose money it is, right?
Yes. But he's asking permission from Hunter to pay Joe's bills out of my account, inverted commas. And then he talks about another account, which is some other Wilmington savings account. He wants to know if he should pay out of that. So either way, I mean, there is at the very least commingling of Hunter and Joe's finances, which is problematic considering you know where Hunter's money is coming from, particularly from, say, Ukraine, from Burisma. He was being paid $83,000 plus per month to sit on the Burisma board. There was money coming in from Russia, from China, from Kazakhstan, from Mexico, from Romania. And so we also know that Joe Biden met with some of these business associates from overseas, these foreign clients of Hunter's who were his benefactors, on a number of occasions. There is the dinner at Cafe Milano that we uncovered a few weeks ago, April 2015. We have emails and text messages and so on showing Hunter organising it, booking the private room at this, Georgetown institution where politicians go all the time. Hunter was going there having business meetings and birthday parties for family members for years. And Joe pops in there a lot as well. So this was a private room. It was a dinner with Hunter's business associates from several countries, including Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and I believe he said that he had on the guest list 3 ambassadors, and one of them he wanted to be a Mexican ambassador. I don't know if that person showed up. And these are countries that he was doing business in, making money from, or hoping to make money from. And we know Joe Biden showed up at that dinner. He's been photographed at that dinner with a couple of Kazakhs, and one of them, the ex-Prime Minister, who Hunter was in emails talking about doing business and enriching himself and his partners with. So it's a pretty disturbing, concerning picture that is being painted. And when you also meld these jigsaw puzzles from the laptop with the information that we have from Tony Bobolinsky, I have his 3 phones that he handed over to the FBI, the contents of those, and he tells me, and he's told others, that Joe Biden was the big guy who appears in an email as having 10% of this new firm, Oneida, that was going to be in a joint venture, very lucrative joint venture with Chairman Xi Jinping at CEFC Energy Company in China. So 10% of that firm, that equity in that firm, was to be held for Joe, the big guy, who Bobulinski tells us was Joe, by Hunter. So that's also, pretty indicative of something going on.
Well, let's use this as an opportunity to take a short break, and we'll be right back. I accomplished a lot in 2020 exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Well, thank you for coming back, and we're going to continue our interview with Miranda Devine, the columnist for the New York Post, commentator for Fox, and investigative reporter extraordinaire. So the question that always loomed over all of this from the very, very beginning, when it first came out, and that was the Ukraine situation. Why would a Ukrainian oligarch who is notorious in the Ukraine, someone who was the minister of the ecology, and while minister of the ecology gave himself all the best leases in Ukraine, which just is inherently illegal, even in Ukraine, who then runs away with $5 billion and is in jeopardy of losing his whole company to the government. Why would he hire Hunter Biden virtually 3 months, maybe 4 months after he was thrown out of the military for failing a drug test within 1 month of being in the military, for a company that's in this tremendous distress, and a company for which a lot of witnesses say he was almost obsessed with the idea that he might lose this company? And then he pays him all this money. It goes down after a while, but it ends up being millions and millions of dollars, however you compute it, to Hunter's company. What's he buying from Hunter? What's he getting from Hunter for these millions of dollars? That hard to see any contribution Hunter makes to the company. There's no record of it. Hard to determine how many meetings he attended. Sounds like the only reason you'd spend that money is to somehow get Joe. That would be the logical deduction that Sherlock Holmes would make about what was happening. And now we have this description that Joe shares in this stuff somehow. Now, that doesn't prove anything, but it cries out for investigation. How is it that this, no matter what is revealed, they don't investigate anything? No matter what is revealed, I don't know. There could be a statement here that he shot 3 people. And I'm not sure the FBI would react to it.
Well, look, we don't know that they're not investigating it. We do know that the FBI has had the laptop since December 2019. And we do know that there are a number of investigations into Hunter Biden and his finances. There's, a tax investigation, reportedly also money laundering and, perhaps some sort of foreign agent registration issue. And you would think that once investigators get hold of the laptop, like you and like Bob Costello and like me, they would see that there is a lot of evidence here of behaviour that at least warrants further investigation. You would think that they would pull on that string and be investigating. I mean, it's absolute gold. It also goes to important national security issues for this country. So you would think that any responsible investigator with the federal government would be looking at that and be independent of any political influence. So let's hope that that is what's happening at the moment. I still hope that that's happening. But, with Burisma and Ukraine, there's been such a dishonest narrative spun by the likes of the Washington Post and the New York Times when they're basically running protection for Joe Biden on this. What we know is that at the time that Joe Biden flew to Kiev and made that statement that he later boasted about, in which he said, you either sack your prosecutor general, your chief prosecutor, or I'm withholding all this aid from America and do it now, or, I'm getting on that plane and you won't get the money. And this is what he boasted doing. So that is a clear quid pro quo, you would think. I mean, that looks very, very bad. So the spin that's been put on it is that that prosecutor was himself corrupt and that actually he was not investigating Burisma at the time. Well, that's not true. The second part.
Yeah, it is not true.
Because just weeks before he was fired, or Joe demanded he be fired, there was an active investigation into Zlochevsky, who was the boss and founder of Burisma, the former energy secretary in Ukraine. His Rolls-Royce had been confiscated. About 4 or 5 of his properties had been confiscated, and some piece of gym equipment. I mean, they had gone in, the prosecutor had gone in and cleaned him out. So Zlochevsky was panicking. And then Joe goes and he, coincidentally or not, threatens the government of Ukraine that they'll lose all this aid from America if they don't sack the prosecutor who's investigating Burisma, and they do it. So then the Washington Post and the New York Times say it was a dormant investigation. Well, it wasn't, because there is contemporaneous reports in European publications in Ukraine and elsewhere talking about those raids that were happening at that time. So it's just not a matter of, it's a matter of really sloppy reporting on the part of those outlets who have just taken as gospel whatever has come out of the Biden camp.
And now we will take a short break. How much equity do you have in your home? 50,000, 100,000, more? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity you have, the greater the chance foreign and domestic criminals will come after you. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing forms of crime. In fact, Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is alerting homeowners they could already be a victim and not know it. Here's how it goes down. First, cyber thieves search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. Next, they pull your home's title. They forge your signature stating you sold your home, and they take out loans using your equity. You're not covered by insurance, your bank, or common identity theft programs. Protect your most valuable asset. Register your address now to see if you're already a victim. and receive a complete title history of your home. A $100 value free. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. HomeTitleLock.com. Thank you for returning. You know, if you focus on February of 2016 alone, it kind of explains the whole case. On February 1st, the Shokin's office serves an arrest warrant on Burisma. And in Ukraine, an arrest warrant of a company means that you seize the company. It's like a search warrant, which unfortunately I learned about. And the only incriminating evidence I had was Hunter's hard drives if they didn't want. And they closed the company down on February 1st. As you say, that's reported in the newspapers. It's also in the files, which I've seen, in the actual official government files, but also in the newspapers. To say that it was a dormant investigation is a bald-faced lie. In fact, it was a very, very hot, active investigation. And you then see, within a period of 2 weeks, Miranda, 4 telephone calls between Biden and Poroshenko. Now, I haven't been able to look at all the telephone calls, but I probably looked at about 3/4. There's no other time in the 8 years that Joe is vice president that he talks to Poroshenko 4 times. The phone calls to a trained investigator who caught the mafia using their phones, it looks like frantic telephone calls. 4 times, fairly lengthy, particularly for a head of state and a number 2 who don't communicate on the phone like pals. Poroshenko is relating his side of that conversation to Shokin, who you could say is lying. But his side of that conversation is that starting within 2 days or 3 days of the arrest warrant, Biden is furious and is yelling at Poroshenko and telling him he wants Shokin gone. And they have contemporaneous conversations, Poroshenko and Shokin, the prosecutor, Poroshenko kind of easing him out. Now, they were very good friends. Poroshenko didn't, and who knows, Shokin may have been doing a lot of other things for him. And to say he was corrupt, if he wasn't corrupt, he would be the only official in the government, including all of Biden's friends, including Biden himself, that wasn't corrupt. His corruption was rather small. He used to get money from prosecutors he appointed. And all you have to do, you know, I met him and interviewed him twice and had people there. He doesn't live a very high lifestyle. If he was corrupt, he wasn't very good at it. Some of the others, like Lutsenko, and they're living the life of millionaires. He's living the life of a middle-class guy. He was not thrown out because of corruption. That is a story that gets developed by Soros, and it gets circulated through the not-for-profits in Europe. It becomes the thing to say, because they knew they had to get rid of Shokin, that he's corrupt. He certainly had an investigation going. Now, I think those 4 conversations, they should be revealed. If Trump had to reveal his conversation with Poroshenko, which turns out to be totally innocent, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the 4 conversations between Biden and Poroshenko are about Russia. Or maybe they're about getting Shokin out because Shokin is going to do damage to Burisma. And I really think the main interest here was Burisma, not Hunter. Hunter was a minor issue. The big issue was to save the $5 billion company. That's what Joe was getting paid for from the very beginning, because Zlochevsky's not a fool. He's not buying, unfortunately, tragically, a drug-afflicted person who can't really accomplish anything. And the one thing Joe was at the time was the most important man in Ukraine. When Biden became the point man, he was the guy giving out the money. And Poroshenko was left with a country. I never verified this, but I've been told it had $800,000 in the bank. They walked out with it. Zlochevsky and his pals virtually walked out with every penny of the Ukraine and took it to Russia. They were basically pro-Russians. So it demands to have those conversations revealed. They're at a very suspicious time. A very unusual conduct, very suspicious time. It's during that period of time that Shokin gets fired. In that 1 month period, doesn't get it announced for another month later. Those conversations are vital. So I think somebody should demand that they be released, the way it was demanded that Trump had to release his conversation, and all of a sudden, it went from quid pro quo, which it wasn't, to it wasn't an appropriate conversation. This might go from a quid pro quo to a quid pro quo that gets explained as trying to fix a case. We're not going to know unless we see it. You've got plenty to look at. Take a look at those. Take a look at that period of time. There is not a tremendous amount on the hard drive during that period of time. What I told you comes more from the documents that John Solomon and I were able to get 2 years ago. The phone calls were a leak to John from the State Department. The meeting is a matter of, the arrest is a matter of record. The arrest is both in the newspapers and in the government records. And the telephone calls, there's some corroboration of those in the records. So this basically took place, but nobody's ever explained it. The amazing thing, Miranda, is nobody requires him to explain anything about this. And if you want to put the best light on it, it stinks. Maybe it's all hypothetical, circumstantial, but every human being in the world would be required to explain this.
The problem is with Joe Biden is because he's had so much genuine tragedy in his life, the people around him and journalists who know him are really afraid to broach subjects that he becomes wounded about. And that includes anything to do with his family and particularly to do with Hunter. But, you know, I understand that squeamishness and that desire to not to, you know, further burden him with tragedy. But on the other hand, that isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. You know, many people have suffered tragedy in their lives and they still have to suffer the consequences of whatever actions they've taken, or at least be accountable, particularly when you're president or vice president. And really, Joe Biden has gotten away with no serious questioning of any of his activities over his entire career. And, you know, it starts from the very beginning when Hunter wanted to be, you know, a writer or an artist, and his father insisted that he basically the breadwinner for the Biden family, so that Joe and the golden son, sadly, the late Beau Biden, could go into politics and, you know, live a life of service and live a life that didn't require, you know, that where they couldn't get cash from unsavory sources. So that was left up to Hunter, and he was then expected to pay tuition for his siblings and to, as he says, give half my income to Pop. And certainly Jim Biden got a lot of the income as well. That's evident from the transactions that you can see on the laptop. So it's a pretty shocking way to treat your son. Really, you know, this is...
It's a very good observation, Brennan. Not many people have made it. And, you know, having been enmeshed in this for a very long time, including when I was first told about this 2.5 years ago and couldn't believe it, because I've known Joe for 30 years. And, you know, my opinion of him was not too smart, nice guy. And it never was dishonest guy. to me, I had to be convinced of that. I mean, I was shocked when I was told about that conversation with the quid pro quo, and then when I saw the documents. So I didn't come. I know a lot of people think I came into this trying to create a political problem for him. I was actually disappointed when I was told he was involved in it, because I told my colleague, this is going to make it more difficult to use this to help Trump, because I anticipated they were all going to line up on his side. I never realized as much as they did, but I realized this was going to cause a problem for us. But the other part that I want to ask you before we finish, because I think this part has the most to do with national security, and maybe another time we'll go through the details of it, but China, the relationships with China go beyond now money. It's not fathomable to me that you could be negotiating with China as the vice president, and your son is even looking for business from China, much less getting it. And I know there's a lot of debate about exactly what China put into the private equity fund, but they did put it in the fund. And they were partners with Hunter Biden and Kerry's son and Whitey Bulger's nephew, while Joe was negotiating to try to get China to leave the islands they disputed with Japan, which they never left and which they further militarized. Every time Joe acts as a point man for the U.S., the Biden family gets millions and the United States gets screwed. He never successfully accomplishes a negotiation. In Iraq, he doesn't get the status of forces agreement. James Biden gets part of a housing deal. In Ukraine, he's supposed to get the Russians out, but he won't even give them guns. The Russians become more powerful. He certainly did nothing about corruption, except many people in Ukraine feel contributed to it. I mean, the story in the Ukraine is pretty well accepted that he bribed Poroshenko. It's in the U.S. that we have trouble with it. Then he goes to China, and he's supposed to get them out of the islands. He's supposed to reduce tariffs. The tariffs go through the roof. The islands, they expand. And the kid gets a big investment. And then many, many other business deals that haven't even been categorized yet. And then the final one after he's out of office, where 2 years ago, the president of the United States was involved in a business deal with them where his family was going to get $10 million a year from the Chinese communists. And he was going to get at least 10% of it. Whether that fits that formula that he had of the 50% or not, or it was a one-off, it's certain from the testimony you got from Bob Belinsky. And the big guy that phrase is used several other times in the hard drive, referring to Joe. This is a major national security problem. Nothing being done about it. Let's take a short break from our interview and we'll be right back. I've been sleeping on my pillows for some time. I love them. They're simply the very best pillows ever made. But I just found out that they also have a wide assortment of other incredible products like their mattress toppers, sheets, towels, and slippers, and more. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, and Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. Pick some pillows or pick several of the other great products, and you can get super discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com, promo code Rudy, or call 1-800-725-7759, promo code Rudy right now, and see each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like the pillows, mattress topper, and geyser sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code Rudy for these new great specials. That's mypillow.com, promo code Rudy. Thank you for returning.
Well, Mayor, it's so enormous. the people who Hunter was tied up with in China were at the very top of what they call the red families, who are the elite in China, who are hooked into the Communist Party and President Xi, and also the PLA, the military there. So, and many very, very unsavory people. I mean, there's one guy they called the super chairman who entertained Hunter at his private clubs.
Now, which one is that? Remember?
He's the super chairman. I'll give you his name off air. And he was so he entertained Hunter in his private clubs, Beijing and in Hong Kong. He ended up in jail, just as his ally, who was a man.
Yeah, okay, I know who he is.
That's another one. Many of his, in fact, practically everyone he did business with in China ended up in jail.
Dead.
Or dead.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. They've got that.
Chairman Yi is probably dead
in the Yangtze.
Yeah, that's right. So and many of them. I mean, but the first guy that he had dealings with, Super Chairman Shea, who was renowned as being a guy who entertained foreigners and people who he wanted to corrupt at his private clubs with, euphemistically, it's written in the Chinese press, with beautiful women. So Hunter, we know, was entertained at dinner parties at these sky-high penthouse private clubs in Hong Kong and Beijing on a couple of occasions, and waxed lyrical when he got back about the hospitality. And this guy was putting up millions of dollars for a joint venture that he wanted with Hunter and Bulger, as you mentioned, Whitey Bulger's nephew, and Devin Archer, who's also been charged and convicted of fraud in New York and is awaiting sentencing. So all of his partners seem to end up, in a sticky end. But Hunter himself gets out scot-free. And it's really concerning. I mean, he was barreling around China, getting introductions to the absolute elite of their financial institutions, their state-owned enterprises, the Bank of China and so on. They were lining up to put money into this fund, run by these neophytes from Boston and New York who really, they weren't exactly in the league of Goldmans and so on. And yet they were getting entree and tapping into the finances of the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world. Trillions of dollars of money was there for the taking for them in this fund, which ended up, their first fund, BHR, ended up having $2.5 billion. We have the board papers from 2019. That was the fund that invested in Henniges, which was that Michigan auto parts company that had technology that was had dual-use military applications, some sort of vibration technology. And this was just on par with President Xi's Belt and Road Initiative, their plans that they're not even keep secret, to go to America to spend lavish amounts of money buying or stealing, if they can't buy it, our technology, so that they can then own the supply chain. We see it. There's a semiconductor shortage in America. There's a shortage of cars because there are no chips to put in them. And China has sort of scooped the pool on that. America doesn't really make very many chips anymore. And that's just one example of the sort of scam that Hunter Biden and his family were involved in, being used by China to do, and being given a few scraps off the table. I mean, it was millions of dollars. We also, another part of the jigsaw puzzle I should have mentioned was the Senate inquiry, the Ron Johnson and Chuck Grassley inquiry, and they've done really great work. It was ignored, but this was back in 2020. They had all these suspicious transaction reports from the Treasury to do with Hunter Biden and his business partners. And that was where they picked up the $3.5 million from Elena Baturina, the widow, she wasn't the widow then, she was the wife of the corrupt former mayor of Moscow. They found that transaction going into a business associated with Hunter. And then there was also $6 million wire transfer from one of the Chinese partners to an associate of Hunter's. And that was what tipped off Tony Bobulinski that he had been ripped off. He had his suspicions.
Sure, I remember the interview. Yep.
That's right. And he'd gone to great lengths and spent a lot of time and energy with, and Hunter and a couple of other partners to set up this joint venture with the Chinese.
And the amazing thing is he talked to you. He talked to Tucker Carlson. I mean, there's a tape of that. Several other people quietly. He really had no reason to lie. He wasn't under investigation. He wasn't being charged with a crime. They accept all this testimony from Michael Cohen, who's changed it about 4 times and has every reason to lie to try to get out going to jail. And they don't even do anything with Bobulinski's testimony, for which, I mean, anybody could lie at any time, but there's no apparent reason for Bobulinski to be lying. He's not getting anything for it. He's not getting away with anything.
Well, also, I mean...
And it makes sense, by the way. What he's saying makes sense.
It's not just his testimony. He has the evidence to back it up. I mean, there are emails, WhatsApp messages and text messages and documents. Everything he has told me and everything I've heard him say, every statement he's made is backed up. He had a meeting in LA with Joe Biden when he first came on board with the Bidens. That Hunter and Jim wanted to introduce him to their father and to his father and vice versa. And so he had a couple of meetings with him in LA. And people have said to Bobulinski, well, what did he say? You know, as if Joe was going to say to him, oh, welcome to our corrupt club. No. As Bobulinski said, it was strictly a high-level meeting. And in fact, Jim and Hunter told Bobulinski before, don't talk business. This is just getting to know you. And that's always the way it is. I mean, I don't know why that should be any surprise to anyone, but it just showed that Joe's, at the very least, what it shows is that Joe's protestations about his knowledge about Hunter's business dealings are very hollow. He said over and over again, I know nothing about my son's overseas business dealings. I never made a penny from China. My son never made a penny from China. I never made a penny from anywhere overseas. I mean, he does protest too much.
Well, I have in front of me the 10% held for the big guy that comes directly from CEFC, which is the Chinese Communist company, and it takes care of the entire Biden family. This is a deal for the Biden family. James is going to get money. His wife is going to get money. Of course, Hunter. And then at the very bottom, it has 10 held for by H, Hunter, for the big guy. And then right behind it, I just happen to have found a reference to him as, say you talk to me and that you want to get all the facts before you talk to the big guy. This would be good for both of us. So this is a deal he's trying to put together, totally unrelated. Looks pretty shady also for the Teamsters. And the Teamster guy wants to make sure he's talking, that he's not just talking to Hunter. Of course, the Teamster guy is not a dope. Wants to make sure it's getting to Joe. And he says, before you talk to me, talk to the big guy. Then later on, a friend of his says, I just saw the big guy at a speech. He did well. Talking about a speech that Joe Biden gave. There are about 5 references internally to the big guy as Joe Biden. Bobulinski then, of course, testifies to that directly. It's corroborated by this. I don't know what you need and then finally, when they're going to give out the keys to the new great office, the first key is going to go to Joe Biden. If he knew nothing about it, why was he going to have an office there with him? And by the way, Jill Biden as well.
Jill Biden as well. And he also, the same email where he asks for these new office keys to be made at the House of Sweden office building in Washington, D.C. for his father and his stepmother, he also asks for the plaque to be written for what the company name was, CEFC USA.
Yeah, it was going to be his Chinese Communist subsidiary in the United States. I mean, it's extraordinary. A 10% partner with Chinese communists is now the president of the United States.
Now, to be fair, that was 2018, and Joe was a private citizen.
He was. But the point is, if the American people knew this, that they were electing a guy who, when he was running in 2019, because he started in 2018, he was a partner of the Chinese communists, including what Hunter described as one of the biggest spies in China. I don't know. I don't think he'd have gotten elected. Right?
Well, but also the point is that partnership started well before Joe left office. I mean, Joe was vice president at the time when and palling around with President Xi and talking about his great close relationship with President Xi and flying Hunter into Beijing to meet with President Xi on Air Force Two in 2013, December. So all of this was going on. The grounds of the relationship and the sort of contracts and the financial understandings were all happening while Joe was vice president. So the fact that after he was vice president, then it was formalized, I don't think is particularly excuses him.
No, it doesn't. And you remember, this is being done when there is an expectation that he'll be the next president. That was true all throughout the 4 years. Probably China's hope was that he'd be the next president. They invested a lot in him. And I wonder, Miranda, since you and I have the hard drive, there are other computers and hard drives out there, at least two I know of. And when you look at the hard drive, you realize it isn't complete, that there are big gaps in it. I imagine, from what I know of the Chinese intelligence and the Russian intelligence, if they don't have the rest of it, they're not very good.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there's one gap in the emails, which is, a very interesting area. It's about 6 months around that trip that he took with his father to Beijing on Air Force Two in December of 2013. There's nothing between sort of around May, June of that year in the emails. That's the biggest gap I can find. Now, and also all of his other China trips seem to have been logged in his diary, and that one isn't. Now, Bob Alinsky and others that I've talked to say, look, it's just standard that you go clean up your emails whenever there's something that you think might be a problem. And you also have to remember that when Devin Archer was charged, Hunter and his lawyer, there are several emails going back and forth about whether or not Hunter would claim to be Devin Archer's lawyer so that he could claim, all about this privilege for certain documents and emails, and whether or not they could reserve those and use keywords and so on. So there was a fair amount of cleaning up going on to do with the Burnham, something we haven't talked about, but what Devin Archer was charged over was this defrauding of tribal, Native American tribal bonds, their pension funds, basically. So, and that business, the Burnham business, there's not a lot on the laptop about it. There's some emails, certainly the early stage of meeting and trying to get Chinese investors. Hunter was, involved in those emails, but again, there will have been a fair amount of sort of legal cleaning up of the laptop, but obviously they haven't done enough considering how much evidence is there.
Well, there'll be a lot more to talk about in the future, Miranda. I know. When can we look forward to the book? Is it the fall, I think you told me?
Yeah, that's correct.
But we'll talk about that another time. Thank you very much, Miranda.
All right, great.
And congratulations.